Today we look at 1 Corinthians verses 10 through 16, one of the great letters of St. Paul, who speaks with such intimacy and so personally of his own experience. The Apostle Paul is known as the first great mystic of the church, the one who said, "Not I, but Christ lives in me," the one who wonders, "I do the things I do not want to do," such timeless psychological insight into the inner workings of the mind, of the heart, of our psychology. Over time, there have been books written about how St. Paul changed the message of Christ, but all of this is distortion of individual opinion, because it is only due to this one man that the message of Christ spread out into the world. Had he not had that experience on the road to Damascus that transformed him from a zealous Jewish scholar who persecuted the first Christians with fanatic intent to destroy them, into this extraordinary individual who changed the world, who changed world history. Had he not gone to the pagan world, to the Greeks, and faced impossible odds to share this message, the teachings of Christ would have remained in a small Jewish circle as a sect within Judaism and disappeared from the world. Just a few years after Christ, in 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the temple and sent the people into exile. It was the permanent end for 2,000 years of Israel, and with it would have vanished into the dust of history those first Galilean fishermen, with their narrow sense of what they were meant to do. But Paul took it across the Roman Empire and planted the seeds that created Christianity in this world. We begin with the reading. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, expressing spiritual truths in spiritual words. The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual man makes judgments about all things, but he himself is not subject to any man's judgment. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? These verses are of great significance, especially for those who might wonder, how is it that others do not sense these things, yearn for these things as you might? How is it that so much of our culture is utterly anti-religion, anti-God, anti-Christianity? Even more, one might wonder why local churches are so full of people who are blatant hypocrites, who do not live these teachings, who are not transformed by him. As a pastor, I often had to face the fact that the elders of the church, the spiritual leaders so-called, were utterly devoid of any spiritual discernment, spiritual life within them. In fact, I can say that many pastors are the same way. How is this possible? That even while they read these words, preach these words, say they believe in these things, there is no reality in their lives regarding this experience of the Spirit. Once again, the central verse, the man without the Spirit does not accept things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them. So when I was faced as a pastor with people full of hatred or judgment or maliciousness or hopeless, egocentric lives, I had to face the fact that the unspiritual person simply cannot perceive, receive, understand these things. When mercy is called for, when reconciliation is called for, there is none of it. Because under the surface, under the phony smiles, there is emptiness, darkness. And for you who might wonder how other members of your family can possibly reject what is so important to you, remember this teaching, that the one who has no sensitivity towards these things or refuses to be open to them, the unspiritual person cannot possibly understand it and can only see all of these invisible things as foolishness. And in this day and age, more than ever, we have become utterly, hopelessly materialistic, living on the surface of life, heading for the grave without any greater meaning in our lives than trying to get ahead, make more money to get more stuff, worship the idols of the culture, and the sacred is forgotten, is mocked, along with all those who recognize it in their daily lives. So from the beginning this has been the case. Now it is even more complicated because within the so-called religious circles, the same thing occurs. The unspiritual often run our churches. No wonder the authentic spiritual seeker is left in a limbo state, not knowing where to go, where to find that which his heart knows can be found, must be found. So do not be surprised that you may feel alone on this journey. Do not be discouraged. Recognize the facts that without this kind of sensitivity towards things of the Spirit, receptivity, yearning, none of it can be integrated into your life. Do not be surprised that there is violent rejection of these things by people who are shut off from it, for whatever reason, who have shut themselves off from it. In the teachings of the Fourth Way, there is this term called magnetic center, which is simply a way of expressing the mystery that some people are attracted as with a magnet, pulled towards these spiritual matters, whereas others have no interest. And even the great minds like P.D. Uspensky could not find a reason why some have it and others don't. Sometimes it is as simple as having had no exposure to this as children, the loss in our society of ancient traditions that at least gave the opportunity for our essence to taste the mystery and wonder of the sacred before the mind took over, and adult worries and concerns and the growing ego of adolescence shut everything out. For instance, in countries that were taken over by communism, take Bulgaria, for instance, one of the most ancient Christian countries, full of magnificent monasteries and teachings. It is said that in those 75 years of communist occupation, more damage was done to the psyche of the people than 500 years of Turkish oppression and Muslim takeover, because the intent was to wipe out this sensitivity to the spirit in the name of what you might call the superstition of materialism. If you can't see it, it's not real. So we are children of all of these factors that have culminated in our modern times into a world that is utterly lost from that which was given to it, that which was found in every culture, this yearning for something higher. I recently heard a quote from one of my great mentors, who said that if we don't have connection with something higher, with a greater consciousness, we are just crawling creatures. If there is no higher life to integrate into our daily lives, we are reduced to the most simplistic, limited version of our potential, of our reality as human beings, that we may understand what God has freely given us, which is to say, we must accept being outsiders, thinking differently from others, even rejoice in the fact of being different, because it must be that way. Whether in Roman times with the barbarism and cruelty all around, and the fanaticism of ancient Judaism, stoning people for this and that reason, or in our high-tech culture that has reduced us to consumers and robots hypnotized by the latest technological invention, distracted from our deeper lives. Rejoice in the fact that you are different, that you know there is something else, and the fact that few around you recognize that is only confirmation that you are on to the true path of life.